In 1890, Simon Green Atkins moved to Winston-Salem. A year later, he gained support from the local Board of Trade to purchase land for a Negro college, later to be named Winston-Salem Teachers College, and a neighborhood where the city's growing population of African American professionals could purchase their own homes. Inside Land and Improvement Company bought 39¼ acres, and in 1892, Jacob Ludlow designed the community. By April of the same year, ministers, teachers, and businessmen bought 50 plots. According to historians, Atkins' descendants say Simon was fascinated by the 1893 Chicago World's Fair, especially by the Columbian Exposition. To commemorate this cultural event, he named Winston-Salem's newest African-American community Columbian Heights. Fast forward to present day. You're looking at Simon G. Atkins' Columbian Heights home. It was later moved to the campus of Winston-Salem State University. But prior to that, this campus was called Winston-Salem Teachers College. Now this is Wallace Street, and it's also the location of the childhood home of Diane Caesar. She's the former director of the Delta Fine Arts Center. Diane remembers Columbian Heights as a community that was safe and filled with a number of innovative Black entrepreneurs. And she also says it was a culturally rich environment because of the influential neighbor, Winston-Salem Teachers College. At a very young age, Diane and her friends were exposed to art, music, politics, drama, and literature.
I think I learned to read at the library there. It was the college's library, but it was also places where kids could come. The librarians had reading hours for us. And there was also a group of teachers and parents that put on performances. And I remember very early being parts of these plays and things. So culturally, I think it did a lot. Intellectually, I think it made me curious. My grandmother fed many of the bachelor teachers, and so around dinner, which I was allowed to sit at because I had to eat, that I heard a lot of politics, I heard a lot of history. I remember people reciting Black poetry. It was intellectually stimulating for a little girl like me, but it also imparted in me a love of cooking and a love of dinner parties and congenial conversations around the tables. My first dance class was at the college with a teacher named Miss Miner. I saw Catherine Dunham almost 40 years later when she was honored in New York. I was able to say, I remember these costumes, I remember these dances from when you brought your troupe to Winston-Salem State. I remember hearing Roland Hayes, the great singer. During the homecoming season, they would bring jazz bands. I remember hearing Illinois Jacquette, I believe. I remember Ethel Waters coming. All of these, Claude Hopkins was a great friend of my family. All of these people came and they were brought by the college, so it influenced how you thought. It influenced all over the state because the regional band competitions, the regional choir competitions were all held at Winston-Salem State during the 40s and the 50s and the 60s. So kids from all over got to experience a college campus. They knew that once they were through with high school, that they can then come, there was a college. There were other colleges, but Winston-Salem State and Teachers College holds a place in my heart. I thought that Black people were doctors, Black people were business people, because this is what I saw around me. This was my community. I knew always that you could be a lawyer because we had lawyers in the family. I knew you could be a businessman because we had businessmen in the community. They lived next door. I knew you could be a college professor because I lived next door to one and I ate dinner with them. So as far as I was concerned, it was a very protective neighborhood with all kinds of professionals, and this is what I would do. As a little girl, the things that I remember are about going downtown. There was segregation. There was part of downtown Winston-Salem around 3rd Street that had offices and doctors' buildings. When you went further over past Liberty, that was more the mercantile part of Winston-Salem. I knew not to ask to go to the bathroom downtown because there were no facilities and you just couldn't. Although there was one place that we would stop by, and please let me remember this lady's name. Her name was, she was a Jewish lady. She had a bakery. Her name was, I can't remember it. Yes, I can. Her name was Ruth Julian. And Ruth Julian had a tiny little bakery, but she was always very welcoming and invited us in, make sandwiches and things. And if I had to use the restroom, this is where we would go. Also, I remember my mother telling me in Cresses, we don't drink colored water, we drink white water, and holding me up to the fountain. There were movies that were owned by African Americans, and we would go. There was the Lincoln and the Lafayette, but the major movie theater when I was growing up was the Carolina, and you had to climb 89 steps to get to the balcony where we were allowed. And my mother just, there were very few occasions that we would go to the movies there, and she just refused to pay her money to a place that would treat her as a second-class citizen. We talked about Winston-Salem Teachers College providing a heart of the community, but also the elementary school, which was Columbian Heights, which had once been a high school, provided a source of community pride. After I was born, my mother worked at the recreation center, which was part of Columbian Heights Elementary School. But when she began to teach, we had to visit every child in her classroom. And we had no car, so we walked. We walked from Happy Hill all the way over to what was Blues Bottom, which would be about 4th Street. We knocked on the doors in the evening, said, I'm Miss Smith, this is where I live, this is what I expect of your child. And the parents said, well, let us know whatever you need, we'll try to help. When there were plays, there was a librarian who came to the library in the summertime to open it up so children could have books and read. And there was that if a child didn't have food, they were invited to the neighborhood, somebody would feed them. If they needed clothes, if they needed soap, if they needed anything, the teachers would do it. I have a friend who's an artist now who talks about one of the teachers encouraging him to draw and bringing him crayons and pastels that he knew it was chalk, but he didn't know what a pastel was. But the teachers went in their pocketbooks and brought these things to encourage the students. When I first moved back to Winston-Salem with my kids, I had an incident at an integrated school. My son was in all AP classes. When I went to the first open house, I was questioned by the teachers whether this child belonged in, was I in the right place? And it was, could I read? Why would you tell me this is this is algebra 2, aren't you supposed to be in geometry? When I'm looking at the schedule and it says this is the door and this is the class, you must assume that my black son doesn't belong in these classes. And it happened over and over again that evening. I was so angry, I didn't know what to do. I finally called the principal and said, this is why black folks have high blood pressure. Even you assume that my son doesn't belong here or I can't read. Now, which is it?
Did you get a response?
I got an apology. And my son did very well there, But it's those kinds of things that you did not have to go through with a black teacher. She understood the child. She may be harsh and she may correct him, but it was only done with love, and there were no presumptions made about his skin color. Sometimes I wonder, did integration really help us? Women like me had a choice, that we didn't have to be teachers. We could go into public relations. We could go into all kinds of other fields that had been closed to us. And so we lost some of these brilliant women who dedicated their lives to teaching and to black youngsters. It took away this stream of extremely bright women from the classroom. And in doing that, many black kids were not looked upon as smart and I don't know how to put it, but they weren't cherished as these teachers cherished them. What has become of Columbian Heights? It almost doesn't exist anymore. Columbian Heights started at 1st Street and went down the hill to Parkview. I always forget that street, which is at the end of Vaugrave, which dead ends at the Anderson Center. 40 started destroying Columbian Heights. There were places. Martin Luther King, I said before, was Claremont. There was a restaurant. There were apartment buildings. I think the Reynolds built the apartments. I think my step-grandfather built them in the 1900s. There was a garage. There was the train station. There was an oval that every child from 1940 until 40 came who got a pair of roller skates came to skate that oval. It was a 2-block oval with trees surrounded by sidewalks. And that was where everyone wanted to be on Christmas morning to skate. 40 took that. Then 52 took the western part of it. Then they enlarged Claremont, Martin Luther King. That took Bruce. And the college began to have land to expand. The nursing building sits on my great-grandfather's and my grandfather's lot. There was a business area there. Leon Brown had a filling station. The Martins had College Grill, which I wasn't allowed to go in until I was 40. And it wasn't there anymore. And then there was Bass's store. There was an ice house. There was a shoe shine man. There were hairdressers. There was a record shop. And Martin Luther King and 40 took all of that. So some of the communities moved, and they have melded into new communities. And they will have their history and their camaraderie. But Columbian Heights, I think, is a memory now.